The Incredibles, directed by Brad Bird. To this day, it remains the best Fantastic Four movie without actually technically being a Fantastic Four movie. It centers around a nuclear family with superpowers, like Fantastic Four. The parents used to be superheroes back in the day, Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl, before vigilantism was pretty much outlawed, like in Watchmen and Civil War. Now, 15 years later, the mom is busy raising the kids, while the dad works a menial job at an insurance company. And he occasionally goes out in secret at night to stop a robbery or something equally small. One day, he is contacted by a mysterious woman who claims to work for a government agency and recruits Mr. Incredible for a job requiring his powers. He accepts, does the job, which is basically defeating a giant robot, but because that event wakes something up in him, he stays in touch and he begins working out to get in his previous shape. And when the agency contacts him again, he goes for the second mission without knowing it is actually a trap, which then leads to the rest of his family having to work together to save him. Now, as I already said in the beginning, the closest comparison and the obvious inspiration are the Fantastic Four comics. There we have four individuals with powers who are connected by familial bonds, and those bonds are actually the core of the story. And Incredibles do exactly the same thing without really hiding who they're copying. The end scene, especially, is a direct homage to the first issue of the Fantastic Four comic. It does work though, because the filmmakers know what they are copying. They are aware of which elements of the original worked, and they focus on those. It's not just a mindless copy. So the film ends up just juggling the main four characters quite well, giving each of them something important to do, but also having each of them undergo some sort of growth as a person. Each of them is slightly different at the end than they were at the beginning, for the better. It also just happens to be a rather competent superhero movie on its own. If it came out later, then the inspirations from the comic book movies that fill the theaters nowadays would be more obvious. But it actually was released all the way back in 2004, before the whole craze with MCU and the DC comic book movies even started. And as such, while the story and the characters can be traced back to the comic books, in terms of purely cinematic language, I think that inspiration was drawn elsewhere. The James Bond movies, the music, the plot elements, some of the technology and the action sequences, even the whole villain lair are just straight up lifted from that series. But again, it's done in a competent way, so it all clicks, it all works together. The animation looks great as always from Pixar, the humor lands, especially the scenes based on character clashes and interactions. I think the addition of Frozone, voiced by Sam L. Jackson, gives the movie that additional element of just, being cool without any pun intended. If I was to have any criticism, I would say that the pacing is slightly worse in the second act than elsewhere, but it's certainly not a big thing and it doesn't stop The Incredibles from being a solid film.